Welcome to TB Dahl Audiobooks. Before the story begins, please take a quick second to subscribe and leave a comment below. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, enjoy the listen.
Undisclosed Background by TB Dahl, Chapter 10, The Counterfeit Truth. The first article appeared at 6:47 a.m. Helsinki time. Riley found it because she'd been awake since 4, sitting in the kitchen with Rask's notebook and a cup of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She was using the apartment's desktop computer, an aging machine connected through a VPN that Katerina had configured before going to sleep, to monitor Russian-language news aggregators she'd tracked professionally for years. The headline on Vzgliad read, "Extremist monarchist network uses forged documents to destabilize Russian historical narrative." The article was 2,400 words, professionally written, clean sourcing, or what passed for sourcing in Russian state-adjacent media. It quoted an unnamed security analyst, an academic at the Russian Institute of Strategic Studies, and a spokesperson for the Historical Memory Foundation, a government-linked organization Riley recognized from her work at Ericsson and Lindgren. She read the article once quickly, then again slowly, marking passages. The core claim was simple. A shadowy émigré organization calling itself Chestnaya Rossiya, Honest Russia, had been manufacturing false genealogical evidence linking fabricated descendants to the Romanov imperial family. The operation, the article claimed, was funded by exiled oligarchs and coordinated with Western intelligence services seeking to undermine Russian sovereignty through historical revisionism. File 17 was mentioned by name. Riley set down the coffee. Read the passage again. The so-called File 17 is not a historical archive. Intelligence sources confirm it is a foreign-backed operational dossier designed to produce fraudulent claimants to the Russian imperial succession. The documents have been assessed by independent experts as fabrications combining genuine period materials with modern forgeries. Independent experts. No names, no institutional affiliations, no methodology. She opened a second tab. RIA Novosti carried a shorter version of the same story, published 11 minutes later. A third appeared on TASS at 7:03, more restrained in language but carrying identical claims. By 7:15, 4 more Russian outlets had picked up the narrative, each adding small variations while maintaining the same structural architecture. Coordinated release. Pre-written. Distributed through a centralized briefing package. Riley had seen this pattern before. She'd written analytical reports about it for clients. The methodology was textbook. Plant the narrative simultaneously across enough outlets that it appears to emerge organically. Then let each publication add its own editorial embellishments until the core claim hardens into accepted background. She heard footsteps behind her. "How long have you been up?" Elliot stood in the doorway, dressed in the same clothes from yesterday, his hair pressed flat on one side. "Long enough." She turned the monitor toward him. "It started." He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and leaned over her shoulder to read. His body was warm from sleep. He smelled like old cotton and the particular staleness of a room that hadn't been aired in days. "Vzgliad, TASS Raya." He straightened. "That's not a leak. That's a launch. Pre-positioned, Volkov's media operation. He's had these pieces ready for days, maybe weeks. The trigger was us reaching Helsinki." "How do you know?" "Because the articles reference Honest Russia by its Russian name, describe File 17 as a dossier rather than an archive, and frame the entire operation as foreign-backed destabilization. That's not journalism. That's a counterintelligence briefing repackaged for public consumption." Elliot pulled a chair next to her and sat down. "Does it name us?" "Not yet." The word yet hung between them. Riley scrolled to the Vzgliad article's final section. The author described 2 unnamed individuals of Scandinavian origin who were being promoted by the extremist network as living descendants of the imperial family. The description was vague enough to avoid libel, specific enough that anyone with access to a partial photograph or a name could connect the dots. "They're building a frame," Riley said. "First, the narrative infrastructure, extremist organization, forged documents, foreign intelligence backing. Then the subjects get inserted. By the time our names appear, the audience has already been told what to believe about us." "How long before names?" "Depends on what they want. If Volkov is patient, he waits for the Norwegian angle to develop first. Police interest, professional consequences, institutional distance. That makes us look like people running from something. If he's accelerating, the names drop within 24 hours. Katerina appeared in the hallway, already dressed, her face drawn tight. She held her phone. "You've seen it," she said. Not a question. 7 outlets in 40 minutes. Riley replied. "Identical structural claims, coordinated timing, pre-written sourcing. This is Volkov's media layer." Katerina sat at the table's far end. "Elena Markham messaged me 14 minutes ago. The reformists are trying to get counter-narratives placed through their European press contacts. But the Russian articles are spreading faster than anything they can produce." "Counter-narratives won't work," Riley said. "You can't outpace a coordinated state media operation with individual corrections. Every rebuttal legitimizes the original claim by engaging with it." "Then what do we do?" "Nothing for the moment. We watch what they release next. The first wave establishes the frame. The second wave fills it with details. The second wave arrived at 11:22 a.m. It didn't come from Russian state media. It came from an anonymous account on a Telegram channel called Novaya Pravda, New Truth, that had 47,000 subscribers and a history of publishing leaked intelligence documents, most of them later proven to be fabricated or selectively edited. Riley found the post through a monitoring alert she'd set up on the desktop. By the time she opened it, the post had already been shared 1,200 times. The leak contained 5 elements: a partial photograph of 2 people walking on a street, shot from elevation, grainy, but recognizable if you knew what to look for. The faces were partially obscured by angle and shadow. The location appeared to be Oslo. A scanned document fragment labeled File 17, Subject Index, showing 2 entries, R17 and E17. The formatting matched the custodian index stolen from Rask's apartment. A genealogical chart linking 2 Scandinavian nationals to the Romanov family through what the post described as fabricated genetic evidence and forged baptismal records. An excerpt from a letter allegedly written by a senior Honest Russia member. The language was close to Katerina's style, but not exact, describing the siblings as instruments of historical correction. A block of text claiming the 2 individuals had been activated by monarchist handlers and were currently evading Norwegian authorities after being connected to the death of a retired archivist in Oslo. Riley read the post 3 times. Each reading tightened the knot in her chest. Elliot. He came from the living room where he'd been checking the building's exterior through curtain gaps. One look at her face, and he was beside her. "The second wave," she said. He read. His jaw worked slowly, the muscles along his temples flexing. When he finished, he placed both hands flat on the table. "That photograph. That's us. Oslo, probably the day we left Rask's apartment. The street angle suggests a camera positioned above, 4th or 5th floor of a building across the road. They had surveillance on Thomas Hefty's gate before we arrived. The File 17 index fragment, that's from the stolen custodian index, which confirms Volkov's operation has access to the original documents. They're not inventing from scratch. They're taking real pieces and reframing them." She pointed to the genealogical chart. "This is where it gets dangerous. The chart is wrong. It contains deliberate errors in the generational links and misidentifies the ancestral connection. But the structure is close enough to the real lineage that anyone who later encounters the genuine evidence will assume it's another version of this fabrication. Poisoning the well. Exactly. When the real genealogy surfaces, people will compare it to this leaked version and conclude both are forged. Volkov doesn't need to prove File 17 false. He needs to make File 17 indistinguishable from his own fabrications. Katerina had come to stand behind them. She read the post over their shoulders. Her breathing was audible, shallow, controlled. The sound of someone managing fear through discipline. The excerpt attributed to a senior member. Katerina said quietly. The phrasing. Instruments of historical correction. I have never used those words. But 2 of my recent messages to the table used the word correction in a different context. Someone extracted the vocabulary and reconstructed a sentence that sounds like me without being me. Stylometric spoofing. Riley said. Feed enough of someone's writing into an analysis tool and you can generate text that mimics their patterns. It won't survive expert examination, but it doesn't need to. It only needs to survive a first reading. The Telegram channel, Elliot said. How many people will see this? 47,000 subscribers. But that's not the audience that matters. This is designed to jump. Monarchist forums, Russian political channels, European conspiracy networks, journalists looking for a story. Within 12 hours, the material will be on platforms none of us can reach. Riley was right. By early afternoon, the leak had metastasized. She tracked the spread from the desktop, opening tabs until the browser groaned under the weight. A Moscow-based monarchist forum called Nasledia, Heritage, had the Telegram post pinned at the top of its main discussion page by noon. The response was immediate and fractured. A user named Dvoglavi Orel, double-headed eagle, posted within minutes. If this is real, then the blood survived. Everything they told us about Perm was a lie. Everything. Beneath it, Pravda Patriot countered, This is an obvious Western intelligence operation, fake heirs promoted by NATO handlers to create a succession crisis. The documents are forgeries. Sviataya Rus added, Look at the genealogical chart. It traces through Scandinavia. Michael Alexandrovich's line through Finland and Norway. Where is the DNA evidence? Where are the church records? Without the baptismal document, this is rumor dressed as revelation. Riley noted that Sviataya Rus's demand for the baptismal record, the very document Volkov's operation had stolen from Porvu, functioned as a trap whether the user intended it or not. The absence of the record would be cited as proof of fabrication. Its eventual appearance would be dismissed as yet another forgery. On a second forum, Belaya Gvardia, White Guard, the response skewed toward celebration. Longer posts appeared within hours, complete with historical analysis, genealogical speculation, and calls for honest Russia to reveal the full truth. Several users referenced Viktor Sokolov's forged version of Michael's letter, quoting the fabricated paragraphs about dynastic continuation as if they were established historical documents. The restorationists were already amplifying. Riley could see Sokolov's fingerprints in the way certain posts framed the story, the language of duty, blood, and historical destiny that Katerina had warned them about. Sokolov's people are using the chaos, she told Elliot, who was eating bread and cheese at the table while reading over her shoulder between bites. The telegram leak gives them cover to push the forged letter. They can claim the leak validates their version because both point to the same conclusion, living Romanov descendants in Scandinavia. Even though their letter is fabricated, the authenticity doesn't matter anymore. What matters is volume. 5 different versions of the story are now competing for attention, and none of them are the actual truth. On a European conspiracy forum she'd monitored professionally for a client report 2 years ago, the story had already been cross-posted with additional commentary. English-language users were dissecting the leaked photograph, debating whether the subjects were crisis actors, intelligence agents, or genuine descendants. Someone had attempted a reverse image search on the partial photograph and claimed to have identified the Oslo street. Incorrectly, but the thread had gained traction. A French-language monarchist blog published a breathless analysis linking the leak to the Brazovo Archive Foundation and speculating about a northern European cell of Romanov loyalists. The blog post was shared 800 times within 2 hours. Riley closed her eyes. When she opened them, the screen hadn't changed. The numbers had only grown. "This is what Volkov wanted," she said. "Not silence, noise, so much competing information that no one can distinguish the signal from the static." The Norwegian angle arrived at 3:17 p.m. Katarina's phone, one of 2 remaining devices they hadn't destroyed, received a forwarded message from Elena Markham. Attached was a screenshot of an internal memorandum from the Norwegian Police Security Service, PST, shared through a contact Markham maintained inside the service. The memorandum was brief, bureaucratic, and devastating. Subject: Foreign intelligence concern, extremist network activity on Norwegian territory reference. Diplomatic communication received from Russian Federation Embassy, Oslo, October 12th. Summary: Russian authorities have raised concerns regarding the activities of an organization described as Honest Russia, Chestnaya Rossiya, identified as an extremist émigré network engaged in historical document fabrication and political destabilization. Russian diplomatic channels assert that the organization has been operating on Norwegian soil and may have connections to Norwegian nationals involved in recent criminal matters, including the death of Henrik Rask, Ref Oslo Police District Case File 2024-1847. Assessment: PST is reviewing available intelligence. The matter has been flagged to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Oslo Police District has been requested to share relevant case materials. Action: Monitor. Coordinate with Oslo Police District II. Witness status of identified persons. Riley read it twice. The second time, she translated the bureaucratic language into plain meaning. The Russian embassy had filed a formal diplomatic communication framing Honest Russia as an extremist organization operating in Norway. That communication had been routed to PST, which was now treating the matter as a potential foreign intelligence concern rather than a simple murder investigation. Oslo Police, Detective Inspector Nordahl's team, had been asked to share case files. "They're not calling us suspects," Elliot said, reading alongside her. "Not yet, identified persons and witness status, but the framing has shifted. We were witnesses to Henrik Rask's death. Now we're people connected to an international political incident. The diplomatic communication gives Norwegian authorities a reason to treat us differently." "How differently?" "Travel restrictions, formal interviews, asset freezes if someone decides our accounts might be connected to extremist funding. And every institution we've interacted with, employers, banks, landlords, will receive inquiries that make our names radioactive." "Can they do that based on a Russian diplomatic complaint?" "The complaint doesn't need to be credible. It needs to create process. Once PST opens an assessment, the machinery runs on its own logic. Files get shared, names get flagged. And every time a Norwegian official opens a document with our names on it, the context they see first is extremist network and foreign intelligence concern." Elliot stood and walked to the window. He didn't open the curtain. He pressed 2 fingers against the frame and held them there, as if testing the solidity of the wall. "Volkov is building a cage," he said. "Not a physical cage, a bureaucratic one. Every institution that might have helped us, police, employers, the legal system, gets a version of the story that makes helping us look like a liability." "Yes. And we can't correct the record because correcting the record means surfacing publicly, which gives Volkov exactly what he wants." "Yes." The apartment was quiet. Father Alexei had left that morning for a contact in Espoo, carrying nothing that could connect him to Riley and Elliot if stopped. Katarina sat in the bedroom, composing the scatter messages to the 9 remaining custodians. The sound of her fingers on the phoned screen was the only noise in the flat, besides the refrigerator's hum. Riley's phone, the last prepaid device, buzzed. A message from Tara, routed through the intermediary channel Markham had established. Something happened at your work. Call me. Riley couldn't call. The prepaid phone was for text only, and even texts carried risk. She composed a careful message asking Tara to explain through the secure channel. The response came in fragments over the next 40 minutes. Tara was typing on her own phone during what appeared to be a break at the Munch Museum, and the messages arrived in bursts separated by silence. Your office called the museum looking for you. They asked if I knew where you were. Then Maria from your team called me directly. She said you've been suspended pending internal review. She said Eriksson and Lindgren received inquiries from authorities about your activities. She wouldn't say which authorities. The official reason is reputational risk and concerns about client confidentiality. Maria said the partners met this morning. Riley, she sounded scared. Not angry, scared. Riley read each message as it arrived. She did not react visibly. She did not close her eyes or take a breath or press her hand against her mouth. She read, and she catalogued, and she felt the information settle into the architecture of understanding she'd been building since the first envelope appeared at Tim Wendelboe, Eriksson and Lindgren, the firm where she'd spent 4 years building a reputation for precision, discretion, and political intelligence, the firm that trusted her to brief ambassadors and corporate boards on geopolitical risk, the firm that had become, over those 4 years, the foundation of her professional identity. Suspended. Pending internal review. She understood the mechanics. A firm specializing in political risk consulting could not afford to have a consultant who was herself the subject of political risk. The inquiries from authorities, almost certainly triggered by the PST assessment, which in turn was triggered by the Russian diplomatic communication, would have landed on the managing partners' desks like a grenade. Their calculation would have been rapid and unanimous. Distance the firm from Riley Hunt until the situation clarified. The decision was not malicious, it was institutional self-preservation. The same kind of rational, bloodless calculation she'd spent her career analyzing in other people's governments and corporations. Volkov hadn't needed to threaten Eriksson and Lindgren directly. He'd built a system where the threat transmitted itself through legitimate channels, each institution passing the pressure to the next until it reached the target. Russian embassy to PST, PST to Oslo police. Oslo police inquiries to Eriksson and Lindgren. The firm's own risk assessment did the rest. They suspended me, Riley said. Elliot turned from the window. My firm, Eriksson and Lindgren, internal review, reputational risk. The words came out flat, professional, as if she were briefing a client about someone else's crisis. When? This morning. The partners met while we were watching Volkov's media operation launch. Elliot crossed the room and sat across from her. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't say he was sorry. He waited. It's part of the architecture, Riley said. Strip the institutional credibility first. If I'm a suspended consultant under review, anything I say publicly carries less weight. I'm not a respected analyst raising a legitimate concern. I'm a person of interest making claims that her own employer found troubling enough to act on. Can you fight it? From Helsinki, using a prepaid phone, while Russian state media is circulating articles that describe me as part of an extremist network? She almost smiled. The appeal process at Eriksson and Lindgren requires a meeting with the managing partners. I'd need to be in Oslo. I'd need to provide a full account of my activities, and anything I said would become part of a record that could be subpoenaed by Norwegian authorities. So the suspension stands, until this is over, one way or another. She turned back to the computer, opened a new tab, searched her own name. Nothing yet. No news articles, no social media mentions, no public connection to the Telegram leak or the Russian media stories. But she found something else, a cached version of her professional biography on the Eriksson and Lindgren website. The page now returned a 404 error. Her profile had been removed. 4 years of work, erased with the same quiet efficiency as a document pulled from an archive. Elliot's turn came 2 hours later. Katarina received the alert through Markham's network, a forwarded screenshot from a construction industry newsletter that circulated among Oslo's project management community. The item was small. 3 paragraphs. No byline. Oslo police have confirmed that an employee of construction company name is being sought as a witness in connection with the death of Henrik Rask, 68, whose body was discovered at the National Museum earlier this month. The individual, identified as a site manager at the Bjørvika waterfront development, reportedly departed Norway without providing a forwarding address to investigators. Sources within the construction industry indicate that the company has initiated an internal investigation into unauthorized site access, missing equipment, and irregular activity reported at the Bjørvika location in the days following Mr. Rask's death. The employee's military background has reportedly been flagged by security consultants advising the company on the matter. Oslo police declined to comment on whether the individual is considered a suspect. Elliot read the newsletter item standing up. He held the phone at arm's length, as if the distance might change what the words said. Missing equipment. He thought about the bolt cutters he'd taken from the Kampen apartment's kitchen, the bicycle he'd borrowed in Middelalderparken, the gap in the site fencing he'd used to enter after hours. Each action had been survival, practical, immediate, necessary. Now each action was being stitched into a different narrative, one where a military-trained construction manager with authorized site access engaged in suspicious behavior after a man's death. "The equipment report is fabricated," he said. "Nothing was missing from my site when I left. I checked the inventory log myself on my last day." "They don't need it to be true," Riley said. "They need it to be reported. Once an internal investigation is opened, the fact of the investigation becomes the story. Company investigates employee carries more weight than investigation finds nothing." "My military record. They're recasting it." "As a risk factor. A man with military training who evades surveillance, accesses restricted sites, and leaves the country without notifying police. Read through the right lens, your background becomes evidence of capability rather than service." Elliot set the phone on the table. He looked at his hands. The small scars from tools and rebar, the calluses from grip work, the hands of someone who built things for a living. Those hands were now being described in a newsletter as belonging to a person who might have done something wrong. "The phrasing," he said. "Oslo police declined to comment on whether the individual is considered a suspect. That's not a denial. It's a non-answer designed to sustain ambiguity. If police said he's not a suspect, the story dies. If they say he is, they'd need evidence. By declining to comment, they let the implication breathe." "Do you think Nordahl is behind this?" Riley considered. Detective Inspector Karin Nordahl had been professional, precise, and skeptical during their initial interview. She'd taken Riley's statement and the envelope without revealing her own conclusions. She was a competent investigator operating within institutional constraints. "I think Nordahl is receiving pressure from above," Riley said. "The PST assessment, the Russian diplomatic communication, those land on her chain of command. She may not believe we're connected to an extremist network, but she's been told to keep us visible as persons of interest. The newsletter item could be a controlled leak from inside the department, or it could be planted through the construction company's security consultants. Either way, Nordahl's ability to treat us as simple witnesses has been compromised." "So we've lost the police too?" "We never had the police. We had a window where reporting the body ourselves gave us credibility. That window is closing." By evening, the fractures inside honest Russia had become audible, even through the limited channels Katarina maintained. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone, reading messages and composing responses, her face graying with each exchange. Riley watched the process from across the room, the way Katerina's shoulders dropped incrementally, the way her fingers paused longer between each message, the way she occasionally closed her eyes and pressed her thumb against the bridge of her nose before continuing. "The scatter protocol," Katerina said finally. "7 of the 9 custodians have confirmed receipt. 2 haven't responded." "Which 2? "A custodian in Tallinn who holds provenance documents from the 1920s escape route, and the Paris contact, the one holding letters from the exile community." "Could they have been reached by Volkov's people already?" "Possibly. Or they may have seen the news and decided that silence is safer than cooperation." Katerina set the phone down. "The keepers are blaming the reformists for the leak. They believe Markham's media contacts were compromised, and that the partial photograph and document fragments were obtained through reformist channels. Is that plausible? No. The materials in the telegram post, the photograph, the index fragment, the genealogical chart, those came from the custodian index. The index was stolen from Rask's apartment. The reformists never had access to it. But the accusation doesn't need to be accurate. It only needs to create suspicion." "Volkov's operating inside HR's divisions," Riley said. "He doesn't need to give orders to every faction. He just needs to ensure they're all fighting each other instead of coordinating." Katerina nodded. "The reformists sent a formal communication to the remaining table members demanding a full accounting of who accessed the index before it was stolen. The keepers responded by accusing the reformists of prioritizing media strategy over operational security. 3 messages were exchanged in the last hour. Each one was more hostile than the last. And the restorationists? Sokolov's people have gone public. Not with names, not yet, but with the forged version of Michael's letter. It appeared on Nasledia 2 hours ago, posted by an account connected to Sokolov's network. The post describes the letter as newly authenticated evidence of Grand Duke Michael's final testament regarding the continuation of the imperial line. Riley pulled up the forum on the desktop. The post was pinned, highlighted, and had generated over 300 responses. Sokolov's version of Michael's letter, the one with the fabricated paragraphs about dynastic destiny, was displayed in full, accompanied by a high-resolution scan of what appeared to be aged paper with period-appropriate handwriting. "The scan is good," Riley said, studying it. "Professional quality forgery. The paper aging looks right at first glance. The ink oxidation patterns are consistent with early 20th century iron gall ink, but the baseline drift in the added paragraphs is still visible if you know what to look for." "How many people reading that forum know what to look for?" "Almost none." The reformists had responded. A counterpost appeared beneath Sokolov's, authored by an account Riley couldn't trace, questioning the letter's provenance and noting that no independent handwriting analysis had been conducted. The post was measured, factual, and buried under 200 comments calling the author a traitor, a Russian agent, and worse. "The analysis I sent through Markham's contacts," Riley said, "the one identifying the forgery, has it reached the journalists on Sokolov's distribution list?" "Markham confirmed 6 journalists received it. 2 have acknowledged, none have published." "Why not?" "Because publishing a debunking requires verifying the debunking, which requires access to the original letter, which requires contacting honest Russia, which means entering a story that now involves Russian state media accusations, Norwegian police interest, and multiple competing claims about Romanov succession. No editor will touch it without weeks of verification." "Weeks we don't have." "No." Riley stood and walked to the window. Helsinki's autumn darkness had settled over the rooftops, the sky a deep indigo above the streetlights. She could see the courtyard below. Empty, quiet, unremarkable. A city going about its evening while 3 people in a borrowed apartment watched their lives being dismantled by someone sitting in a Moscow office. "The opportunists," she said without turning from the window. "You said some of them vanished." "Pavel Orlov and at least 2 others connected to his financial network. Their phones are off. Their known addresses in London and Geneva are empty. Their accounts in the Brasovo Archive Foundation were cleaned out 3 days ago. How much money? Elena estimates approximately 400,000 euros. Operational funds, donor contributions, and maintenance budgets for 2 safe houses. So Orlov took the money and ran. Or Orlov took the money and was told to run. There's a difference. Riley turned back to the room. You think Volkov gave Orlov an exit? I think Orlov has been Volkov's asset inside HR for longer than anyone suspected. The custodian index sale was the payment. The Vanishing Act is the extraction. Orlov doesn't need to stay and fight because his work is done. He's delivered the map of File 17's evidence chain, he's taken enough money to disappear, and his departure creates one more fracture for the remaining factions to argue about. That's consistent with what Rask's notebook suggests. The entry about V knowing before the table convened. If V is connected to Orlov's network, then the compromise goes back decades, not just to Orlov, to whoever recruited Orlov, to whoever decided that honest Russia's financial wing could be penetrated. Elliot, who had been listening from the hallway, stepped into the kitchen. I've been checking the building, he said. The courtyard access is clean. No new vehicles on the street that I can see from the rear windows. But that doesn't mean much if they're using fixed positions in neighboring buildings. We should assume they know approximately where we are. Riley said. The Helsinki watchers at the church saw us board a tram. Even without following us to this address, they can narrow the search area. Then we need to move again. Soon. But I need to finish mapping this first. She gestured at the desktop screen, which showed 7 open tabs: Russian media, Norwegian news, monarchist forums, the Telegram channel, Eriksson and Lindgren's website, the construction newsletter, and a timeline she'd been building in a text file. What are you mapping? The sequence. Volkov's operation isn't random. It's layered and timed. The Russian media articles launched first. That's the frame. The Telegram leak followed. That's the content. The forum reactions are organic chaos that serves his purpose without requiring coordination. The Norwegian institutional pressure, PST, police, my firm, your company, that's the structural isolation, and the HR fractures are the internal collapse. She pointed at the timeline on screen. 6:47 a.m., Russian media launch. Coordinated, pre-written, simultaneous. Establishes narrative. Honest Russia is extremist. File 17 is fabricated. Descendants are promoted by foreign intelligence. 11:22 a.m., Telegram leak. Anonymous uses stolen File 17 materials mixed with fabricated elements. Partial photograph, index fragments, false genealogy, spoofed HR communication, designed to spread across forums and platforms. 12 p.m. to 3 p.m., forum amplification, monarchists, conspiracy networks, European blogs, multiple competing interpretations, Sokolov's restorationists inject forged letter. 3:17 p.m., Norwegian institutional pressure surfaces, PST assessment triggered by Russian diplomatic communication. Inquiries reach Eriksson and Lindgren and Elliot's construction company. 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., HR internal fractures accelerate. Keepers blame reformists. Reformists demand accountability. Restorationists push public revelation. Opportunists vanish. Each layer supports the others. Riley continued. The media frame makes the leak look credible. The leak generates forum chaos that makes counter-narrative impossible. The institutional pressure removes our professional standing. The HR fractures eliminate organized resistance, and all of it happening simultaneously means no one, not us, not Markham, not Dahl, can address one problem without the others getting worse. Elliot studied the timeline. He traced the progression with his finger, the way he might follow a structural diagram on a blueprint, looking for load-bearing connections. What's the next layer? He asked. Our names, publicly, attached to the narrative that's already been established. When it happens, we won't be people. We'll be exhibits in a story that's already been written. When? I'd give it 12 to 24 hours. Volkov is waiting for the institutional damage to settle. Once PST has formally flagged us, once my firm has completed the suspension, once the police interest is documented, then our names become confirmable through official-looking channels rather than anonymous leaks. That's more damaging. Anonymous leaks can be questioned. Official records carry weight. Katerina's phone buzzed. She read the message. The color in her face, already faded, drained further. "The Tallinn custodian," she said. "The one who didn't respond to the scatter protocol. What about them?"
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.